Good day, today. We're setting sail once more, picking up right where we left off with one of the most consequential expeditions in world history, Christopher Columbus' second voyage. If you thought his first trip was a game changer, you'll want to stick around, because this next chapter is where the story truly explodes in scale and complexity. After his celebrated return to Spain, Columbus didn't waste any time. The Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, were so impressed by the tales of newfound lands that they funded a second expedition almost immediately. But this was no small-scale reconnaissance mission like the first. This was an armada. Forget the 3 small ships from 1492. This time, in September 1493, Columbus commanded a massive fleet of 17 ships. That's nearly 6 times the size of his original fleet. And it wasn't just the ships that were bigger. The crew size was staggering. Around 1,200 men were packed onto these vessels. This group was incredibly diverse. It included soldiers ready for conflict, priests ready to spread their faith, farmers, artisans, and officials. These weren't just explorers anymore. They were colonists. Their mission wasn't just to explore, but to establish a permanent Spanish foothold in this new world. This voyage marked a fundamental shift in intent from discovery to colonization. Along with the people, the ship's holds were filled with something just as transformative, a biological Noah's Ark. They brought horses, pigs, cattle, and sheep. They carried seeds and cuttings for wheat, sugarcane, grapes, and various vegetables. None of these plants or animals had ever set foot or root in the Americas. This intentional transfer of European life, what we now call the Columbian Exchange, was about to reshape the ecology of an entire hemisphere, for better and for worse. The goal was to recreate a slice of Spain across the Atlantic, to make these new lands productive and profitable for the crown. The journey across the Atlantic was swift and successful this time. With better knowledge of the winds and currents, they made landfall in the Caribbean in just over 3 weeks. They first sighted the island of Dominica, and then sailed through the Lesser Antilles, naming islands as they went: Guadeloupe, Montserrat, Antigua. These initial encounters were far from the peaceful trading Columbus described from his first voyage. Here, they encountered the Carib people, reputed to be fierce warriors. Evidence of conflict and resistance was immediate, setting a grim tone for what was to come. Upon reaching Hispaniola, the island where he had left the small settlement of La Navidad, Columbus was met with a devastating sight. The fort was burned to the ground, and all 39 men he had left behind were gone. Accounts from the local Taíno people, led by the chieftain Guacanagri, suggested that infighting among the Spaniards over gold and women, combined with retaliatory attacks from neighboring tribes, led to the settlement's destruction. This was a stark and brutal welcome back. The dream of a peaceful, cooperative colony was shattered before it even began. Undeterred, Columbus moved eastward along the coast of Hispaniola to establish a new, more defensible settlement. He called it La Isabela, in honor of the Queen. This became the first formal European town in the Americas. Streets were laid out, a church was built, and stone houses were constructed. But La Isabela was plagued with problems from the start. The location was poor, with no fresh water source nearby. The crops they brought from Europe struggled in the tropical climate, and disease, likely from a combination of malnutrition, unfamiliar pathogens, and poor sanitation, ran rampant among the settlers. Discontent and disillusionment grew quickly. The primary objective for the Spanish crown, and for Columbus himself, was gold. The small trinkets he brought back from the first voyage had fueled incredible speculation about vast riches. Columbus, now serving as governor of the new colony, implemented policies to extract this wealth. He sent expeditions into the island's interior, demanding that the Taino people provide a certain quota of gold. This system was brutal and unsustainable. The Taino had no large gold mines. They collected small amounts of gold dust from rivers. The Spanish demands were impossible to meet. This insatiable quest for gold led directly to the escalation of conflict. When the Taino couldn't deliver the requested gold, the punishments were severe. The initial, sometimes cautious, interactions of the first voyage devolved into open hostility and systematic subjugation. Columbus and his men began capturing native people, forcing them into labor not just to find gold, but also to build the new settlement and farm the land. This marked the beginning of a system of forced labor that would have catastrophic consequences for the indigenous populations of the Americas. The resistance from the Taino grew more organized and desperate. They fought back against the Spanish incursions, but their wooden clubs and arrows were no match for Spanish steel swords, crossbows, and cavalry. The horses, in particular, were a terrifying weapon, alien to the native people. The Spanish also brought war dogs, trained to attack. The clashes became massacres. The Spanish response to any resistance was swift and overwhelmingly violent, setting a pattern of conquest that would be repeated across the continents. Amidst the chaos on Hispaniola, Columbus was still an explorer at heart. Leaving his brother Bartholomew in charge of the struggling colony, he took 3 ships in 1494 to explore further west. He was still convinced he was in Asia and was determined to find the mainland of Cathay, or China. During this expedition, he explored the southern coast of Cuba, insisting to his crew that it was a peninsula of mainland Asia, and even made them swear an oath to that effect. He also encountered Jamaica for the first time, but he never found the grand cities described by Marco Polo, only more islands and more indigenous communities. When he returned to La Isabela, he found the colony in even worse shape. The settlers were near mutiny, and the conflict with the Taino had intensified into a full-scale war. His governance was increasingly criticized, both by the colonists who felt he had misled them with promises of easy riches, and by the Crown, who heard reports of mismanagement and brutality. The dream was turning into a nightmare. The colony was a hotbed of disease, starvation, and violence. The second voyage, which began with such grand ambition, ultimately laid the groundwork for the darkest aspects of European colonization. It established the template for resource extraction, forced labor, and the violent suppression of indigenous peoples. The introduction of European diseases, to which the native population had no immunity, began a demographic collapse of unprecedented proportions. Within a few decades, the Taino population of Hispaniola would be almost entirely wiped out. In 1496, Columbus decided to return to Spain to defend his actions and request more support. He left his brothers in charge, but his reputation was tarnished. He had sailed with a grand fleet to build a new world, but had presided over the creation of a deeply troubled and violent one. While he had successfully established a permanent European presence in the Americas, the human cost was immense and undeniable. This voyage was a pivotal moment, transforming the Atlantic from a barrier into a bridge, but a bridge that carried conquest, disease, and subjugation, along with new peoples and ideas. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Columbus's second voyage. It's a complex and often difficult part of our shared history, but essential to understand. If you found this video informative, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the past. Let us know in the comments what historical event you'd like us to cover next. Until then, stay curious,